We are back, the making of a marketer. It's Andy Pondillo, Jess Nickerson today on this wonderful Wednesday. And we are excited today to talk about a lot of different things. We're talking about some entrepreneurial spirit today, Jess, something that, I don't know. I'm curious to ask our guests about this. I feel like a lot of people have a little bit of it in them. I honestly want to discover like what that is. But most importantly, Jess, before we start, I always hit you with the surprise. So my surprise today from the marketing world, I'm in tune to a lot of different things, but the thing that I'm really in tune to is Firefest 2 dropped this week. So if you're looking for a marketing case study, it's out there. It's allegedly sold out, and Firefest 2 is here. Jess, are you excited?
Oh, I can't wait. Yes, Andy, you'll really have to help us all out here by talking more about what's really happening and the marketing strategy and the social media strategy behind that. Because I did watch the documentary on Netflix and I was disturbed. I'm just gonna leave it at that. She was absolutely disturbed.
You'd be happy to know that when I managed a small team, I actually did a small training session on influencer marketing from Firefest. So without the bad stuff, like just pretending that it was a real concert, we talked about it and the influencer strategy and how innovative it was. But I derail. That's how I like to start the podcast. That's our new thing, is what can I surprise Jess with right out of the gate that's non-rehearsed. But what is rehearsed today is we have Dave Schneider. He is the founder and CEO of Shortlist, and Dave is an entrepreneur. He's done a lot of different things in this digital industry. So we're talking to him today about what Shortlist brings to the table, but also we want to get into the mind of a CEO and an entrepreneur and what that takes, and what are those steps for making something big like this happen. So Dave, welcoming you to the show, and a big thanks for having you here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Andy and Jess. Pleasure to be here.
So let's start off right out of the gate. We have a question we ask everybody, and it has to do with creativity. So I know when you're designing a company, there's going to be a lot of creativity because there's a number of people trying to do this. There's crowded marketplaces. It's tough to break into. So let's talk about, when you get stuck creatively, what is your mastery of getting unstuck?
I think for me, everyone kind of draws creativity from various sources. Mine is always other people. I always find it very motivating to meet with other individuals, hear about what they're working on, their passion and motivation, even if it's a project that really has nothing to do with what I'm kind of, my field of interest, starts to kind of get my wheels turning. It just sort of kickstarts my brain to say, you know what, I should need to sit down and think about what is our 1, 2, 3, 5-year plan? What are our mission, vision, values? What are these different things that, I hear that they're applying to their projects, their teams, and just kind of give me some takeaways to look at my own. So yeah, I tend to kind of draw creativity from other entrepreneurs. That's why I do enjoy, going to conferences, doing networking events. I always come back, always very kind of jazzed up. 95% of the time, I tend to kind of work by myself, out of my home. My teams are always remote. Most of my team for Shortlist, for example, is in Macedonia. So the people interaction is a little bit of a scarce resource. So whenever I'm feeling a little bit uncreative, I'll seek out some conversations with human beings.
I love that, Jess. We talk about that all the time, like talking to other humans. I mean, we can't stress that enough, Dave. That's something we've tried to find some parallels to a lot of the different, marketers and executives we've had on this show. And I feel like that's just such a constant thing that we hear, is that human touch, whether it's in your vertical or not.
Absolutely. Yeah. I, some months, not to totally pivot into a whole other story here, but some months ago, I live in Philadelphia. It's not necessarily known for its tech scene. There's entrepreneurs here, but it's not one of the big name San Francisco, New York, Boston, Austin type of places. But there were a couple groups where some entrepreneurs kind of used to get together pre-COVID. some meetup groups, for example, if people are familiar with the social site meetup.com. And there was one called Philly Tech Entrepreneurs that hadn't really been engaged with for a while. And I reached out to the owner and asked if I could kind of take it over. And since then, we've been kind of running some events month to month, just meeting up at like a local bar. And we've been getting some nice crowds, like 20, 30, 50 people or so, and just people work on different things. So it's cool to, I guess, if since I wasn't really seeing that in the city, to kind of go out and kind of create our own community, revive like one that had been active in the past, and then just it's been amazing some of the conversations and people that have been introduced just through that. So if you're out there and also maybe doing a lot of work from home and things like that, I would definitely, I would say in my own experience, trying to go in some networking events, trying to do some co-working spaces, just trying to bump casually, serendipitously into some other people is a great way to maybe get you out of your rut.
Dave, is there a question or something that you're really curious about when you talk to these people? Like we're curious about creativity.
Yeah, it always depends, on the person, and I guess kind of trying to understand a little bit about their journey. But I try to just, I guess, learn about what they're passionate about. When you can get someone on the topic of a passion, then they tend to speak with it with a lot of energy and enthusiasm. Maybe that's business, maybe that's some hobby they've picked up, recently. And like, so I run this agency, but actually in my spare time, I really like to do woodwork or something like that. It's like, cool, let's talk about that. Or, whatever it might be. So many of conversations when you meet someone new for the first time, you tend to ask sort of like, where do they live, and maybe are they married with some children, or what do they do for work, and things like that. And those are topics that are all well and good, but I think a lot of us sometimes are like, we have something where like we just want to talk about, right? Like something we've read, or some hobby we've kind of picked up, or some documentary we saw recently like Fire Fest, and just kind of like trying to steer people towards that conversation and give them space to just like talk excitedly about something. That always just, I sort of feed off of that excitement, even again, if it's not something I know that much about. It's always interesting to just kind of learn. So, that I'd say generally speaking, trying to kind of, I guess I wouldn't necessarily put someone on the spot and go, what are you passionate about? But, trying to kind of steer them in ways and be like, have you been, working or doing anything interesting, recently, or have you come across or seen anything interesting? Just give them that freedom of space to talk about what they want.
And that's something that Jess actually did with myself. We were part of a buddy system at work, and Jess mentioned, something to the extent of my radio days, which are long gone. It was my name was Crash with a K. That was my little marketing ploy. But you talked about that, and it was like, hey, have you done a podcast? And I was like, no, but. And then I started talking about it, and it's like the passion of like doing like on-air work and speaking, and how I just like to have kind of open-ended conversations and these types of things. Like it started to come back again, and it literally was prompted just by just asking a question. So I think there is an importance to that. So Jess, I know that was something that kind of surprised me. I said, let's just go for it. And then, we made some magic happen.
Yes, definitely. I love the idea about, tapping into the person's passions, because as Dave was saying, he's right. It's like you feel the energy. It's like when we're talking about marketing, or when we're talking about creativity or innovation, like you feel the energy from us, and it definitely sparks more out of the box thinking, creative thought, just by like leveraging and picking up off of that energy.
Most definitely. And like one thing we learned in radio, Jess, is that you got to just keep the flow going. So right now, Dave looks like he got bumped briefly for connectivity issues. So pardon us as we try to get him back, but we'll keep the live show running. And that's something that I think I'm going to be curious and just learning about him more and more. Is, the next thing we talk about is what is Dave's start for one to be an entrepreneur. I had someone a long time ago tell me, it's like, Andy, you love social media. Why don't you just run your own social media agency and just go for it? And I was like, that, the first place my brain goes is I go to Bar Rescue, and these people that like spend their entire life savings on opening a bar. So like my first thought is like opening an agency and I might go broke. So like I'm just super curious, like what is the confidence for, someone to go in and just start a company like that?
Yes, this is 100% so timely. I mean, I'm seeing my LinkedIn feed being blown up right now with entrepreneurial and entrepreneur content. And I actually saw a, a a study conducted recently on LinkedIn around small business. And in 2027, 50% of the business in the US will be run by small business owners and entrepreneurs. So like this is definitely a timely topic and something that more and more people are looking into and being encouraged to like take that leap.
Yeah, and it's so much. Oh,
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm so sorry. My
Yeah.
computer just shut off like very randomly. The battery's fully charged. I don't know what happened.
Well, no, well, Dave, what was great is you helped me revisit another radio skill and how to keep something running. In the live broadcast, is you always have to find a way to keep it running. As Dave's trying to get back and online right now, is hey, we always have some padded topics to like go off of. And what I hear a lot too, just in what you're talking about is I feel like startup world has become such a big thing in the tech industry. And, we talked to a Super Tim several months back, and he talked about, what are growth patterns that somebody likes to see in kind of a startup world. And that's so fascinating to me because it's like, as a marketer, I think about all these different metrics, but I don't always think about it from, a small business startup, like what you need to see, what timelines have to be. And it talks about, it really discusses that alignment. So Dave, bringing you back in here to our conversation, what we were just talking about is we were super curious. So you start your career and you bridge your career into becoming an entrepreneur CEO. What was that motivation? And how do you really like eliminate some fears of doing that? Like what's that signal that says you can go for it?
Yeah, there's a lot of happenstance and just kind of unexpected paths that tend to kind of happen when you allow them to. Originally, I wasn't ever really thinking entrepreneurism from an early age or really from any age whatsoever. I went to college, I got a job afterward. My job was nice enough. And then at some point, my girlfriend, she really prompted me to say, why don't we go do some travel? Why don't we take some time off and go digital nomading for a bit? And I was intrigued by the idea. I said, why not? Why don't we take a little time off, while we're young, type of a thing. And we started to kind of map out this trip. And as we started to kind of run the numbers, the finances, we saw that, we had some savings, but we probably were going to need to bridge the gap a little bit. So we started to build a website and start a travel blog and work with some sponsors and make a little bit of money that way. And when you kind of get that first like dollar online, that sort of is a little bit of an epiphany moment, because I'd never earned money that way. I'd always kind of just been a salaried employee. And so it was interesting to kind of have that happen and then to sort of see it scale up a bit. And you start to kind of understand that there are other people that are living this lifestyle who have progressed in their careers, and they are running, service agencies or building software or whatever it is. And you kind of, the path kind of starts to open up. And so as we started to go down the line of traveling more and more, and I mean, we basically digital nomaded for about 5 years or so, it became almost a necessity to, we became attached to just doing our own thing. And one thing kind of led to another, and here we are, 10 plus years later, and running shortlisted some other things. So, it's sort of allowing, I guess, dominoes to kind of fall over and doors to open, and just sort of taking a little bit of a chance, I guess, with regards to the travel, which was probably the biggest risk that kind of was taken at the time. I thought about it and I said, what's the worst that happens? I go home, I live with my parents for a bit, I find some other work, and then there we go. And then I move on with my life. I still have my education, I still have whatever network I've built, like I still have other skills I have. No one can really ever take that away from you. So as long as you feel that you have some degree of like a safety net, it starts to demystify, some of these quote unquote risks that you're taking.
And it's interesting, Dave, to hear it from that perspective. Something that has been said to me by multiple people in my career, just with my kind of social media background and how I've been able to build this, is they're like, Andy, you'd be perfect to go run an agency one day, or you'd be perfect to build something like this from scratch. And I think we're doing that with this podcast. But I personally, when I think of the risk, I was always like, that sounds like perfect idea, but I'm freaking scared to do that. But I love the way you explained it. I think you did it at the right time. It sounds like you did it before, marriage, kids, things like this. You were doing it young. And I think that there's probably a lot of young people listening to this show right now that they might be getting out of college. It's like, is this a path for me? Do you think that timing aspect plays a big role in it?
Definitely did in my case for sure. If I was, maybe I'm less risk averse today because there are certain other responsibilities that I have, with kids and wife and mortgage and things of those. So I definitely don't want to sort of minimize, like, oh, well, why doesn't everybody just, go to Thailand or whatever it is? We all have different things kind of going on in our lives. Nevertheless, there are still many examples of people who later in life, in their 30s, 50s, 40s, 50s, and beyond, start businesses, very successful ones at that. They take some calculated risks. They have the support maybe of a life partner who maybe can be the sole earner for some period of time, or whatever it is. It is doable. It's something that you have to kind of sit down, think out. But to immediately, kind of sweep it under the rug and say, well, I can't do this because I'm not 23. Definitely, I don't think that's the message.
So let's talk about that with Shortlist. So let's talk about what you're doing right now and how you're leading over there. What is Shortlist? What is the day-to-day for you as the CEO, and kind of take us through that growth of how you got this thing from the beginning stages to where you're at right now.
Sure. Shortlist is about 5 years old. We could call it many things. On the surface, it probably looks like an SEO agency, which is not inaccurate. I sometimes like to call it a productized service for link building. We also offer some other services like content strategy, website design and dev, and things like that. But it's relatively nuanced in terms of what we offer. But even with that focus, it's still a pretty crowded space. There are a lot of agencies that offer similar services. There are other productized services and tools that people could use for this to kind of achieve the same end result. And that was the case 5 years ago as well. It wasn't the case that we were some sort of first mover advantage and we kind of went in and now here we are and now nobody else can kind of do what we do. I have not been one to generally been intimidated by a space that had competition and that people were working in. Sometimes that has benefited me and sometimes it has not. But at the end of the day, when a market is large enough, I often find that there is potentially a niche that you can carve out for yourself. And in the space of link building, we found that there's just a lot of people not really providing very high quality, very low standards in terms of the different websites that people were getting backlinks from. And so we had heard similar types of complaints from people who had worked with agencies before, and they were not happy with the quality of the product that was provided. They were not really happy with maybe the pricing or the fact that so many services were bundled, or they didn't feel like they were getting kind of the individualized kind of experience that they were expecting. And so we built kind of Shortlist to have like a mom and pop feel, but then to try to grow as much as we could, but never compromising on our kind of quality standards and our values. And whether or not that's limited us, so be it. But I'm happy kind of with what we've achieved so far. So essentially we serve, small businesses who have an online presence and are looking to maybe increase their rankings for certain keywords that they're ranking for, or they're creating content and they need some backlinks to give that content more authority, eventually into more traffic and sales, or they want to revamp their website and they want to do a redesign, a rebrand, or they need some content created for them. Those are kind of the main kind of customer journeys that we come across. As I mentioned, the team is fully remote. It's about 24 of us or so, most of them in Macedonia. And I really wanted to, I'm a lifestyle entrepreneur. I have a digital nomading background. So I'm always thinking like, but what if I want to go to Peru, but then what? So I try to kind of create these services where I'm not sort of a bottleneck. And that is why, like I mentioned, some would refer to us as an agency, but I like to think of us more as kind of a productized service for link building, which is to say that we will do some strategy and we will, fulfill orders, and we will give you direction about, on-site and off-site SEO and keyword research and things like that. But I'm not the main point man, kind of running all the campaigns. I have some client interaction, but it's sort of minimal. And in that way, I can be focused more about the team and the services that we run, and a little more kind of on the business instead of in the business, as they say.
And I want to really hone in on, Dave, the importance of SEO. So me coming from the agency world, there's been a couple of different times. I'll go like very, very beginning of agency world for myself. It was like I came in as a social media person, but they also want me to do a little SEO, also a little bit of email marketing. And it's like, man, I'm an expert in social media, but like I know a little bit of SEO. So what it sounds like you're saying is that you really, really hone in on it. And then kind of like more recent agency experience for me, we were a more like paid digital media service. So we're trying to reduce your ROAS, CPL efficiency, creative suggestions, things like that. But sometimes, like when we could marry this to a great SEO strategy and bring it all together, it would be wonderful. So it sounds like this is a great service for someone that might have some of these other things in place, but SEO content optimization is where they really need to start pivoting a little bit more. And they know you're going to get an expert level here versus kind of getting these bundles that you see out there.
Yeah, SEO can be the gift that keeps on giving. If you have visitors coming every month and, checking out your product and booking calls and things like that, it's awesome, right? It's awesome when it works. It's not easy. Sometimes it takes months, even years to kind of build up the quality content, the authority, and it's not necessarily applicable to every business. There's a lot of nuances. There's a lot of times when this is the right path for someone, and times when it isn't. With regards to agencies, again, at least sort of in my experience, there are so many out there that are offering everything. And I understand from their perspective, the customer becomes more sticky if they are involved in more services. And also you can potentially create maybe a more effective growth campaign when you're incorporating multi-channel and you've got SEO and content and paid advertising and social, and you own all that strategy and you can really kind of guide the entire ship. But I mean, these are just massive industries or spaces. Even within SEO, with it being more or less kind of the one channel that we focus on, there's still so much that even we don't really know. There's so many changes going on algorithmically with Google, the incorporation of AI. There's all these basically updates, changes every month, every year that we need to stay on top of. I couldn't really imagine also offering social and paid advertising and affiliate marketing, influencer marketing, whatever it is, at a high level. So we try to just kind of stick to our bread and butter, what we feel we're more best in class in, and we leave the rest to the other guys.
So on that point, a little bit off of the SEO track, but you bring up a good point around like knowing when you're offering too much or deciding when to take on a new product or service for your organization. Do you have any tips or advice for our entrepreneurs out there when thinking about, oh, should I be adding on another product? Should I be adding on another service, or is this too much?
Sure. Some of the things that helped us steer in this direction, and full disclosure, we had started to introduce some other services into the agency with the thought that, hey, why don't we go kind of full service like everybody else? That's what everyone's doing. It must be the right way to do things. And then we quickly found that we just lost our identity. It became very difficult within the website, within the marketing materials, the brochure, sales, etc., to kind of explain like who we are and what we do. And I've been on many calls where I ask people sort of why are they talking with us? I mean, there's so many other people they could be like, interviewing for service work and things like that. And many times people will say, you guys look like this is what you do. I wanted someone that specialized in this. And when we started to add on those other services, we lost that, and we started to kind of put ourselves in a body of water where we were kind of outclassed, I think, by just more established, polished, resource-backed agencies. And I said, this is just not where we're going to be able to kind of compete. So what we can not, well, I don't want to say own this space, because like I said, there are still many others who are in this, but we can play in this space that makes sense. So I think, it comes, you have to kind of have a bit of a intuition around who you are, what your team is, what you are not, what resources you have available, what you want, what you want this business to be. And when I looked at kind of, my model of these sort of remote teams where I tend to try to play more of a strategic role, but not always like directly involved in all the client work, and something that could just be very productized. So if you go on our website, unlike many agencies, we have month-to-month pricing that you can just see what it is, what we charge, and what you get for that. It just, for us, it just kind of made sense, if that makes sense.
One time I was on it was when I was working on an internal team, we were getting agencies to pitch us. And there was a lot of feedback people were asking me because they hadn't worked in that world before and I came from it. And I was specifically asked that question, Dave, that if it doesn't have the pricing, you have to fill out the form to find out the pricing. What does that mean? And I usually said, you don't want to know. It's likely going to be high. So that's I always felt that was good to have that transparency and that understanding. You did bring up one thing here I definitely want to hit on, and this is relating to your SEO world. So Chat GPT AI, big conversation. How do you see it affecting your world right now? Is it helping, hurting? Are you still trying to figure out kind of what the dominoes are?
Still trying to figure out the dominoes is my short answer. In the longer answer, I think some of the pros and cons here that we're seeing. First of all, there's an existential question about search and kind of where search goes from here. If ever people were to really just go to something like a Chat GPT and get questions answered, like, what does that mean for content? What does that mean for content creators? If someone can kind of go to a bot and get, a pretty decent, usually distilled answer of what they need without having to kind of click through different websites and load screens and read and things like that. But also, devil's advocate, like, those bots are trained on content that people create. So it's like there's a chicken and egg issue there. Like, how do they have to kind of coexist in some way. So us being an SEO, there's an existential question about search and kind of where that goes. But in the short to near term, I don't expect everybody to just be moving over to kind of Chat GPT and all of a sudden nobody's Googling anymore, and it's not worth it to rank at the top of Google or whatever it is. Those things are all still pretty valid, and they'll be valid tomorrow and next week, etc. With respect to how this works with businesses maybe pursuing their own SEO campaigns, certainly all the AI tools are enabling businesses to do more themselves. You have AI tools that can design logos or websites, artwork in general, create images for social media, that they can write copy for social media, they can write blog posts. Are they at the level yet where they are as good as maybe potentially human written content, at least human written content when it's good? Probably not. And you see some tug of war with Google and de-indexing maybe AI generated content and kind of on the hunt for that. And now there's this other branch of tools about, is this AI or is it not? They're looking for detecting and things like that. It's something that we need to be aware of. It's one of the reasons I do kind of like the space that we're in, because it kind of forces us to be on top of these kind of tech trends. We are able to use some AI content, like writers ourselves, to help seed some of the articles that we write. We always have humans editing and kind of putting finishing touches on them, but it is nice to be able to kind of get that source material out there, and that allows us maybe to improve our turnaround times and to decrease all the kind of the manual work, which maybe allows for lower prices and maybe opens up the service to other businesses that otherwise wouldn't have been able to deal with the price tag of kind of agencies and stuff like that. So yeah, back to my short answer, we're still kind of like figuring it out and seeing what the best way to kind of fit it all in, but it's definitely something we're paying a lot of attention to.
I know, Jess, that's a question you and I have started to get a lot on our sessions. It's kind of like this open-ended type when we consult different clients is, how are you thinking about AI? And, I think it's the same thing in social. We're just all trying to wrap our heads around it a little bit right now and what that approach is. We've done some methods where we tested asking it to audit creatives for us, and wasn't bad. It had some good nuances to it of what it wanted us to do, but I still think there's very much a human element. So I think we've all kind of fallen in the same place, is that while it might speed up some work, I don't think Chat GPT is coming in to replace, high-level marketers, high-level SEO marketing anytime soon, because there's still a lot of work to go with it.
Yes. IBM is saying that it's a reskill, essentially. So they just came out with a new study talking about how 40% of the workforce will need to be reskilled. So not replacement, but it's definitely going to be something that, as marketers, entrepreneurs, business leaders, it's going to come into our world and we will need to adapt.
So Dave, let's take the next few questions to wrap up today. And I want to kind of just dig into your personal world working as a CEO. So when you built Shortlist, I know you've worked on some other projects as well, if you'd like to highlight, can you kind of just go through what the framework is? So, we hear when we talk to partners that are like in startups, for instance, they have, their growth phases. They have these different phases in which they need their company to scale in order to give them indicators that it could succeed. Was that very scientific for you? Was there a strategy behind this? What was your technique?
It's idea validation is a funny thing. And I would say sometimes maybe the ones I spent more time validating ended up doing worse. It's hard to kind of understand, like predict what's going to be a hit. So for example, I had a software product I've been working on for some time and kind of like HR tech. And I had done all this like competitive research and, checked out the market and, did all these calls with people and started kind of building this tool. And basically, long story short, like nobody was really interested in it. Shortlist, on the other hand, was sort of this somewhat of a side project where I only ever really wanted to be able to build links for myself and, for other projects I was working on. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if I had my own service that I could just kind of leverage at cost? And so I started to do link building, and I asked a couple other business owners if they would kind of join in and maybe foot some of the bill, and that way it would just kind of even out or whatever. And there was interest from that, and interest kind of just spread, and eventually started kind of modeling it out. And I said, oh, I think this, this has sort of some potential. The businesses that I've worked on that, ever kind of made anything of themselves, there were always like breadcrumbs along the way. There was always someone who was interested or excited about what you were working on, or organically some customer would sign up that you had never interacted with at all, and they just kind of sent you a message or bought something, and you found the right team member at the right time, and things just kind of would fall into place. There's always something that was hard to kind of replicate, but paying attention to those signals and understanding kind of when you're getting them and when you're not. is a real difficult but important kind of gut check that I try to make. So for example, when I start a business, that's when you're maybe the most objective about it. Before you've invested really any time or money or whatever it is, you can kind of put some guidelines and say, if it hasn't hit this in 6 to 12 months, I should really consider maybe just moonlighting it. And for example, I had that with the software where I had written way long ago, like 12 months. If we're not here, it's probably done. And then 12 months came by and I was like, okay, I guess that's it. And so, but in the process of building the business, you're always kind of thinking like, oh, you want to just give it another shot, give it some more time and things like that. So trying to kind of upfront, I guess, set some of those expectations when you can be objective about it. Try to pay attention to the breadcrumbs, because if things are going to happen, there's always some clues along the way, some precursors to revenue, some genuine interest and excitement, and I don't know, whatever it is that kind of leads you to eventually the end result of hopefully some success.
This was, a great parallel for this. What this reminds me of is, when you're at the blackjack table and you go through your entire bankroll, and you know that it's probably hits your moment where you're probably not going to make ROI at a blackjack today, but then you go to the ATM machine and you're really not going to. So, that's my parallel of entrepreneurship is the blackjack table. But for serious talk, I think it makes a lot of sense, Dave. And I've heard this a lot, and I'm curious if you hear it in your spheres too, is that a lot of times your first or even second, third projects, they aren't the ones that take off, but it's that kind of that attitude that you're going to kind of figure out the right, the right company, the right project, the right thing, and you're eventually going to hit on it. But knowing when to pull out of a project sounds like it's just as important.
Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurship is kind of like staying in the game, at least for most of us. Sometimes, hey, you just strike oil and whatnot. But for many of us, it's we need the learnings, we need to make the mistakes, we need to have some pivots, have some evolutions. And if you're all in at the blackjack table and the hand doesn't go your way, then you have to leave, and that's kind of where I've found myself plenty of times with entrepreneurship, where I'll take some risks, maybe even sometimes I probably overstepped a little bit, but never, bet the house on anything to know that if it didn't go my way, hey, it stings, but there's another tomorrow. And now you have 6 to 12 months of whatever it is, of additional learnings, of people that you've met, of knowing what isn't working and being able to try to kind of pivot from that. So yeah, I think your analogy is spot on.
And then final question, Dave, been a great discussion. This is one that I was super excited about because this is just a perspective that, we don't get a lot of, hearing from someone in your shoes. It's been really, really helpful. And I just know that someone that's listening that might be looking to get into this, I think you've summed up, so many questions that somebody might have. Looking into yourself right now, so shortlist, that's likely, your big project right now. Is there anything else you have on the cooker right now, or is it you're really focused in on growing shortlist?
I probably should be 100% focused on shortlist. At least that's kind of what I hear when I, hear from people, read books, and they kind of go, hey, just stay focused, stop shiny object syndrome and all that. But as is my nature, I try not to spread myself too thin, but I like to have one or two other things that are it's kind of like in the pipeline, because again, you kind of have to put feelers out and you have to kind of see, are you experiencing some breadcrumbs, some interest? So one of the things is, as I mentioned, this kind of entrepreneurs community in Philly, which I'm really excited about. We call it Philly Tech Entrepreneurs. I've never really been involved in like a community driven sort of business or organization, and it has a different feel to it. SEO is cool, but it's just not quite the same. I don't know, it just feels a little bit, it's more of this online business that we run, and we help businesses grow, which is nice, but there's always a level of, I guess, disconnect between myself and kind of the end user. With PTE, I'm kind of out there actually meeting other people in Philly, and it feels like maybe I have a chance to potentially impact like the tech scene and tech ecosystem in the city that is not necessarily known for tech, and also influence like the next generation of entrepreneurs. And even though I feel very much in my journey, I do have, I guess, 10 or so years of something behind me. And so there's probably some 25-year-old out there who's me, and what they need is a place to go and meet some people and get some feedback and stuff like that. So happy to kind of be able to provide that. So that's one thing that, what the business model ends up being, if anything, is still TBD. We have some ideas about, does it become some sort of accelerator or incubator or membership site, or do we just run cool events and people have fun? I don't know, but that's a little kind of, something cooking, I guess.
No, I love it. It's something that just always keeps you thinking and keeps us thinking. Like one thing that Justin and I have highlighted a lot since doing this program, and it's no different today, is it's actually like motivated us in our careers, just hearing a lot of different perspectives and how people are staying fresh out there. It's very, like you said, it's easy. You could just say, hey, I have shortlist going, it's what I'm focused on, but you're staying fresh and you're creating things and getting involved in the community. So love that, Dave. We are at time right now. Fantastic interview. Again, Dave Schneider, CEO, founder of Shortlist. Be sure to check it out if you need SEO. It's the place to go. So Dave, till next time, it was wonderful having you here today. And I know that we both learned a lot.
Thanks so much, guys. I really enjoyed it as well.
No problem. See ya. So Jess, that is another great way of I feel like expanding horizons. Like I feel like we went through what Dave talked about today, and going on a journey across the world, and coming up with this. And I just feel like it's such a consistency as we talk to marketers, and it's about what they're doing that excites them. But I necessarily don't feel like when we're in the marketing room, like coming up with like the best marketing strategy, CPLs, CPMs, things like that, we're not talking about these things. And I don't know like if there's like a route to normalizing it, but it's just so fascinating to me when we do this podcast, we hear such a different side of marketers and executives that we didn't hear before.
Absolutely. And very timely with the newsletter that we released yesterday, talking about finding creative inspiration. There's lots of parallels to what Dave was saying with what Tom Anderson did and how he got into photography and finding his creative flow in that way. So I'm loving it.
Yes. And Tom Anderson, that's our guy still. He's been on Instagram. I saw him in the pool not that long ago. Where was he? He was Hollywood, I think. He's back in the States again. So you never really know where he's at, but he just pops up on Instagram every now and then. So, he's living the life, and, still, I think pondering what his next adventure will be. I still believe that Tom from MySpace will jump back into the game at some point, and we'll be here to interview him when he does.
Yes, we're putting it out there.
Yes. But no, back to Dave though. I think it's so interesting. I feel like selfishly, when I talk to people in our world, I'm most fascinated by CEOs, because it is such a, there's two paths to it. There's like corporate CEO, which, you work up the ladder, you spend 30 years trying to get there. And then there's also like 25-year-old CEO that just goes for it at a young age. And I'm just so curious about the mental space of where they're at and like what their cues are to go for it. And I found it fascinating where he said, worst case scenario, I end up living back with my parents. That was my scenario not that long ago. I was like, if I didn't get this digital thing to work, like when I was unemployed, I was close to living with my parents again in my later 20s. So it's just interesting to hear that. That would have been impactful for me 7-8 years ago to hear somebody say that, just to not feel alone in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. And he still instills a lot of the mindsets that we've talked about in previous episodes. And it's just refreshing to hear. But we've talked about, just going for it, just like not being perfect and or thinking about perfection and just continuing to do things. He talked a lot about, learning. So like even if he did fail or even if it didn't work, and he mentioned that a few of his endeavors didn't work, it was an incredible learning opportunity and a way for him to better understand the market, better understand his customers and what they're looking for.
And I think about that too from, larger CEOs out there. And, like Zuckerberg's the one that's in the news all the time. So, Meta was, Facebook, Meta, whatever you want to call it, was started as a startup. It grew to what it is today. There's documentaries, there's movies, there's all kinds of things about that. But we've also seen them fall flat on their face a few times. Like we've seen them kick off projects like the metaverse that didn't seem like it really got very far with what we're trying to do. But we've seen, Meta pick up again. Like the sales have been good the last quarter. So it looks like it's starting to come back again. So I think that, we see it in kind of this entrepreneurial lens, but we also see it at the highest stakes. So it's interesting to just go through a CEO's mind, like, do they stand still? And I don't think in a tech industry, a lot of places like to stand still, or do they go for it? When do they go for it? And sometimes it seems like it's just a hunch. And, you have to be willing to fail to do that. But I think the lesson here to take for all of marketers and just people in this professional world is, I can activate a campaign for $30,000 and it could fall flat on my face. But was there a learning that I took from it? So the next one I launch can do really well. And then also, it might feel like I'm like the worst person in the world because I messed this campaign up. But there's CEOs out here who are launching $1 million endeavors, multi-million-dollar endeavors, knowing that it's a flip of a coin. So there's a lot of people doing this in this game. So I think it's like you pick and choose your moments, but I think it's a reminder that people are doing this and, there are avenues to go for it.
Mm-hmm. And being open to having those conversations, going a little deeper into why something failed. So Dave, is talking a lot to his community, to other entrepreneurs, and it was a way for him to find creative inspiration, but also too, it's a way to continue to move forward. Like the creative flow will lead to the innovative ideas.
And I love that too, because, you and I both have different, little side projects we do. The podcast is one of them. We both do some teaching. I actually had floated the idea in the past. I actually tried to start a Pittsburgh digital club, where we could do meetups and whatnot. I think the miss that I had on that is I did it too close to COVID. I did it like in 2021. I don't think the market was ready for that yet, but it kind of like brought some energies. Like, should I revisit that again? But I love the energy that a lot of these kind of passion projects bring. And I think, again, I think we say at most podcasts is that there's a direct attachment to those projects. I feel like that we see in our day-to-day lives in as marketers.
Yes. And now I'm starting to think, Andy, this could be the time. You've gotten some creative inspiration from Dave, and Pittsburgh may need this community.
I don't know that I can get behind easier than our roller coaster influencer series. There's a lot more work that goes into that. And there's a lot more that can go wrong when doing creative elements like that. But I feel like I can pull off a little easier.
Well, I mean, again, Dave gave you some creative inspiration there too, with starting his travel vlog. So it's just something to think about here. And you've got so many possibilities, so many routes.
See, this is the why you're a good instigator on this, but there's been like people, and I don't know about maybe your world, just tell us if you've ever felt like this, but people are like, Andy, why don't you just go like build something? Like you're one of these people who just likes to construct things. I'm like, I do, but I'm like a lot of people, it's some of the risk of failure, time, effort, things like that. So I think we do a good job of demystifying this on the making of a marketer.
Agreed.
So upcoming, Jess, we've got some things we're working on. I did preview Firefest at the very beginning of the show. I am trying to work on something We don't know what something is yet, Jess, but we're working on something. I want to know, what is the marketing strategy for Firefest 2? Now, if it's happening or not, I don't know. It's a crazy thing. A lot of things happen that shouldn't have happened on Firefest original. We don't condone it in any way. But the marketing to me has always been fascinating on this festival, because if you say the word FYRE, fire, everybody knows what it is. So the fact this thing is back, there was a popular agency that worked with them the first time, Jerry Media. I doubt they're involved again after the first incident, but the marketing that they put together, actually, I feel like is a template for influencer marketing that a lot of companies use today. Like, they were really innovative in the way they did influencer marketing. So I'm real curious what this is. It came out of thin air. Billy McFarland is back. So very curious to see how this turns out. So I might be mentioning it on the podcast here and there, because this is like a fascinating case study to me.
Absolutely. And like we've discussed before, when it comes to influencer marketing, there were foundational techniques and skills that are being taught in social media classes today. So it is important for us as marketers, like, using this as a learning opportunity and a way for us to continue to grow and experience. We need to dive a little deeper. And I'm curious too, because again, watching that documentary, it was very disturbing, and it absolutely makes me question social media. And I mean, this is something that's, we are in social media, and I want to learn more.
Well, what it did for me as a marketer that made me question a lot of like how I'm teaching people how to market is the real marketing that went into Firefest is composed into a couple parts. It's getting a bunch of influencers on a beach and shooting a commercial. Then the influencers are paid to do the commercial. They post on their own feeds. And then it was Kendall, I believe, Kendall Jenner got $250K to do one post. So it was the commercial shoot, it was get the influencers, it was Kendall Jenner, and it was all organic after that. And so you're already talking like, just like the logistics of this, you're probably in the millions. But then I think about, hey, there's like big companies that spend millions of dollars to do these large commercial shoots, and it's just for the commercial and nothing else that comes after it. It's not running the ad buys. That's not, the brand to demand strategy. It's not the retargeting strategy. Like, Firefest didn't use any of this. Like, this was an influencer pay upfront to organic strategy, and it sold out immediately. And I think that's where the old crap happened to Billy McFarland, is I don't think they expected it to get that big. And then it's like, we can pull this off, and they couldn't. So it's just fascinating to me, because we get pinged about organic strategy from time to time. And I think there's a wide belief still that exists that organic can't be, mega multi-million return on investment. And it can. It's nuanced, might be a little trickier, but when we look at this influencer strategy, that's the part that fascinates me.
Absolutely. Because again, it goes back to word of mouth, and this idea that we, especially on social, like we are trusting others in our community, and we want that social proof. So in a way, an influencer represents that social proof.
Yes. Yep. So represented Firefest is cool. So Fire 2 will be working on that. And then it's gonna be a couple weeks from now, we have someone coming from the space program. So that'll be exciting too. But just, we are all up on time. So thank you once again. I think this was another fabulous episode, and I'm looking forward to what's to come here in the coming weeks.
Yes, I can't wait.
We'll talk soon. It's the making of a marketer, Marketing Podcast Network, Spotify, LinkedIn Live. We'll see you again coming here next week. See ya.
Bye.